Harry Potter has put the whole world under a spell. Around the boy who lived, an insane cult has formed role-playing games, fan fiction, museums, themed shops, 500 million books sold, billions of film viewers. And at the same time, Harry Potter has earned some very influential enemies, much more real than Voldemort. Plenty of people think the books are dangerous, harmful, or just dumb fairy tales for eternal teenagers. Cheap literature for those who can't handle anything serious? Yes, of course. The Harry Potter series is insanely overmarketed, but the secret of its success is not just PR. Rowling managed to pack into 7 books a crazy concentration of ideas and references. She mixed world classics, religion, political intrigue, historical drama, and even managed to predict the future. She created the key book series of an entire era, the era of the millennials. Millennials are those born between 1981 and 1996. I'm one of them. When the first book came out, we were children and teenagers. Then, without noticing, we turned into 30 and 40-somethings. Many of us already run corporations, hold important government positions, and in 10-15 years, will finally become the global elite. In this video, I'm going to explain how the Harry Potter books became almost a Bible for 1, maybe even 2 generations. Which Harry Potter character scares the king of horror, Stephen King himself? Why do people keep rereading the books and rewatching the movies, and not only at Christmas? And I'll show how Rowling managed to foresee the future we live in now. We've spent a lot of time carefully building this big video to answer these and other mysteries of Harry Potter. Even if you were born before 81 or after 96, you won't be bored. Trust me. Even if you've read every book back to front, we've got things to surprise you with. And if you haven't read them and only caught pieces of the films, welcome. This is cult content, where we talk about the iconic pieces of pop culture that made us who we are. You're watching History's Omitted, where stories don't just get told, they finally get explained. Fairy tale, Christmas story, and something darker. If we boil it down, almost every fairy tale in the world is made of the same basic elements. Harry is at once a poor orphan and a chosen savior. Over the course of the story, he goes from miserable Cinderella bullied by his aunt's family to a sort of prince. He has loyal helpers, his best friends Ron and Hermione, and to keep the heroes from breaking their necks, there's a wise old man watching over them. Dumbledore is the perfect archetype of the good wizard, a mix of Merlin and Gandalf. Merlin, by the way, is mentioned a couple of times in the books. Gandalf stayed behind to guard Middle-earth. So yes, on the surface, Harry Potter is a children's fairy tale. Case closed. Well, yes and no. The fairy tale layer is important, but it's far from the only genre living inside those 7 volumes. Rowling was heavily influenced by Christian literature. Harry Potter often reads like a Christmas story. In that genre, the characters are given a chance for a miracle on Christmas Eve, but to get it, they have to go through trials and become better people. The godfather of this genre is Charles Dickens, author of Great Expectations and David Copperfield. In his A Christmas Carol, the miser Ebenezer Scrooge is put through a chain of ordeals and, by the end, is freed from his love of money and becomes kind and generous. Harry never had a problem with greed, but he spends the whole series hardening his spirit. The idea is roughly the same as Dickens, through trials to a better version of yourself. So far, this still sounds like children's literature. In a fairy tale or a traditional Christmas story, there's clearly good and clearly evil, black and white. Rowling smashes that right in the first book. In Philosopher's Stone, Harry and his friends are sure that the villain is the potions master, Severus Snape. He looks like a bad guy. Long black robe, greasy hair, murderous stare. How did they even let that creep near children? But we find out that the real danger is not Snape, but the stuttering Quirrell. The severe teacher actually saves Harry's life when he stops him from falling off his broom in a Quidditch match. On one hand, Harry Potter looks like the stories we heard as kids. On the other hand, Rowling pushes the narrative to a new level. Between black and white, she inserts a whole spectrum of gray. The further we read, the more boldly she juggles genres, both modern and ancient. From ancient myths to Shakespeare, Harry Potter is packed with references to what we usually call the classics. ancient Greek and Roman literature, and everything orbiting it. It's hard to miss the three-headed Cerberus in the first book. Half-giant Hagrid wins him off a Greek fellow, and Dumbledore uses the dog to guard the Philosopher's Stone. But Rowling goes further and plays out an entire myth. In Greek legend, Orpheus, son of Apollo, wants to descend into the underworld to bring back his dead wife. The entrance is guarded by Cerberus. Orpheus plays the lyre and softens the monster's heart. Harry also gets past the dog named Fluffy in English with music. Only in his case, the dog just falls asleep and starts snoring. Other classical elements are scattered all over the place. In Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore and Harry go to retrieve a Horcrux, they cross an underground lake by boat, a clear echo of the Styx, the river leading to the realm of the dead. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry escapes the graveyard, he brings Cedric's body with him. That's straight from Homer's Iliad, where one hero returns to battle to recover his friend's body. There's also the Greek idea of blood ties of sworn enemies, people somehow destined to kill each other. Harry and Voldemort are linked not only by prophecy, but also by distant genealogy, descendants of Slytherin and the Peverells. Harry even has something of Heracles about him. Not the Disney muscle bro, but the original Greek hero. Heracles did so much in his life that he was eventually elevated to godhood, though he never truly sought it. He ends up on Olympus almost by accident. His jealous wife poisons his clothes with a love potion that turns out to be deadly. To end his suffering, Heracles throws himself on a funeral pyre. His soul splits in two. The immortal part goes up to the gods. The restless part remains roaming the underworld. This is very close to Harry's post-mortem scene at King's Cross. He sees a pitiful, mutilated fragment of Voldemort's soul doomed to eternal torment. Harry himself, unlike Heracles, refuses to go on to the light and returns. Even the language of magic in the books is soaked in antiquity. Most spells, like the famous Wingardium Leviosa or Expelliarmus, are written in dog Latin, a playful fake Latin used by generations of British schoolkids. It creates a double effect. It feels ancient and learned, but it's also a bit of nonsense. Some spells, though, actually follow proper Latin. Expecto Patronum literally means, I await a protector. The Patronus takes the form of a totem animal. Harry's is a stag, the animagus form of his father. Even the killing curse, Avada Kedavra, is a twisted descendant of Don't Laugh Abracadabra, which itself goes back to Aramaic. Rowling also couldn't ignore the giant of English literature, William Shakespeare. Her favorite play is Macbeth, so the central reference from there is the self-fulfilling prophecy delivered by witches, very much like Voldemort's prophecy. There are bits from The Winter's Tale too, with a heroine turning into stone, just as Hermione is petrified by the basilisk, taking huge stories from the canon and simplifying them into something you can read at 12 is the first key to Potter's success. But by itself, that wouldn't be enough. Growing up with the hero, Rowling did something trickier. She didn't just borrow plots, she built the series so that the hero grows up with the reader. Harry changes, and with him, changes how he sees the world. Think about yourself in primary school. In the first book, the characters are around 11. You're still a child. You've stopped believing in Santa, but the world feels full of wonder. And if your teacher could turn into a cat, life would be perfect. Then puberty hits. You get stubble, your hormones go wild, and in Harry's case, people start trying to kill you on a fairly regular basis. The older you get, the more frequent and painful it becomes. Hogwarts gradually stops being a magical castle and turns into a threatening, haunted place. We'll dig into that darker side in another video. The point is, you simply cannot squeeze this arc into a single fixed genre. It's a messy blend. Fairy tale plus mystery, gothic horror with a light romantic thread. About that romance, it's not really there. If you've read or at least watched Harry Potter, you know what I mean. There's no central love story, just side plots. Even Ron and Hermione only really happen at the end. Most of the serious love drama belongs to the older generation. Take Lily and James Potter, Harry's parents. Their love story is overshadowed by a third figure, Severus Snape. A careless choice he makes in youth leads to Lily's death, and he spends the rest of his life tormented by it. This thread is written almost in the margins, but it's powerful. It echoes Dante's Divine Comedy. Beatrice saves Dante and guides him through limbo and purgatory. Lily is that kind of saving star for Snape's soul. His desire to atone and protect her son becomes the meaning of his life. Harry himself, meanwhile, is too busy to build a personal life. In pure millennial fashion, he's focused on his career of saving the world from a dark lord. Detective, psychological novel, therapy for a generation. Harry constantly solves mysteries like a detective. Dorothy L. Sayers, one of the queens of detective fiction, said there is no room for romance in a proper detective story. So the lack of love story makes sense. There's plenty of hatred though. There's something very similar in Harry versus Voldemort and Holmes versus Moriarty. But the books still aren't true detective fiction. Harry is no Sherlock. He's incredibly lucky, and people keep feeding him clues and ready-made answers. The biggest mystery of the series is Harry himself. This pushes the story into yet another genre, the psychological novel. The inner life of the character shapes both his own fate and the fate of those around him. Harry has to understand and manage his emotions. He is highly emotional, and that's exactly why he struggles to master occlumency, the art of shielding your mind. If he were less empathetic, he'd be an easy target for propaganda. Here, Rowling hits the nerve of her audience. Millennials, compared to their parents, are more anxious, more introspective. They're searching for their path, trying to understand who they are. Who fills therapist schedules today? People aged roughly 25 to 40. Harry's story works like a long, gently disguised course of psychotherapy. Fantasy or science fiction? Now, let's look at the world Rowling puts her characters into. She was definitely inspired by the titans of fantasy. I've already mentioned Dumbledore as a Gandalf-Merlin hybrid, and the similarity between Frodo and Harry has been pointed out a million times. But the packaging is deceptive. Unlike many of her predecessors, Rowling isn't really writing high fantasy. She's much closer to science fiction. First, the story happens in real, modern Britain. The wizarding world is hidden, but it shares the same timeline and geography as the Muggle one. Second, like any good sci-fi author, Rowling stumbles into predicting the future. We'll get back to that later. She builds a collage from everything she read in her youth. That alone doesn't make Harry Potter great literature, but she manages, maybe even intuitively, to find a mix of genres that works astonishingly well. And she doesn't just go dark. There's a lot of humor and even satire in the books. History and World War II under the invisibility cloak. For all the jokes, Harry Potter is stuffed with tragedy, just like real history. The wizarding world is synchronized with the non-magical one. It might seem like Rowling is obsessed with the Middle Ages. There are castles, cloaks, feasts, heraldry, but the deeper historical layer is used more like set design, told as myths and legends. Characters invoke it only when things get really bad. For example, when the school is being terrorized by ancient monsters that Salazar Slytherin left in a girl's bathroom. The basilisk itself comes from antique texts. Originally a small, incredibly poisonous snake, which by the Middle Ages had morphed into a full-blown monster. In Potter, it's a giant serpent guarding the Chamber of Secrets. Other ancient plots are used to highlight characters. Godric Gryffindor's sword is often compared to Excalibur. In one version of the legend, Arthur draws his sword from a stone, like a true Gryffindor draws the sword from the Sorting Hat. In a lesser-known version, there is no stone, but a lake, and the mysterious Lady of the Lake. In Deathly Hallows, Harry dives into a freezing lake to retrieve the sword. Twice that sword is used to kill a snake. First when Harry slays the basilisk, then when Neville cuts down Nagini. That's straight from St. George killing the dragon, a story plastered all over European heraldry. History in Potter is rarely moralized. It isn't rewritten, but it is broken into a bright kaleidoscope of references. Interestingly, surveys show millennials are very into history, but mostly as entertainment. It's cool to go to a big, immersive exhibition. Thinking deeply about genocide and war is less popular. It's not good for mental health. Rowling understands this. She does what a clever cat owner does with medicine. She puts the pill inside the treat. For an Englishwoman, World War II is the defining trauma. But the war itself is never named in the books. You won't see Third Reich, concentration camp, or Blitz on the page. That's too much for a kid's series. Instead, she uses 1,945 as a clue. In that year, Dumbledore duels Grindelwald and defeats him. Grindelwald is obsessed with the greater good, the idea that wizards should rule over muggles for their own benefit, all in the name of blood purity and eugenics. His motto looks uncomfortably close to Arbeit macht frei, the slogan forged over Nazi camp gates. Grindelwald's terror mostly ravages continental Europe. He doesn't dare poke Britain while Dumbledore is there. The peak of his reign of terror falls on the early 1942, the exact years of the Muggle War. But Grindelwald is not Hitler. He regrets what he did. There's a theory that he essentially surrendered to Dumbledore and that their powers were almost equal. He then sits in prison for decades, and when Voldemort comes to interrogate him, he refuses to help. In real history, we have a strangely similar figure, Albert Speer, Hitler's architect and later Minister of Armaments. At Nuremberg, he's the only one of the 22 major Nazi leaders who openly admits guilt. He spends 20 years in Spandau prison, writing endless reflections on what he did. Like Grindelwald, he realizes too late what he helped build. Dumbledore and Grindelwald are also obsessed with the Deathly Hallows, 3 legendary artifacts that supposedly make their owner master of death. Look at the symbol of the Hallows. A triangle, a circle, a line. It looks uncomfortably like certain Masonic signs. When the book came out, conspiracy theorists had a field day. The echoes of Nazism show up again in Voldemort's followers. Death Eater meetings feel like gatherings of powerful men obsessed with mysticism. Voldemort's hysterical temperament increasingly resembles Hitler's final years, when he stops restraining himself at all. The Malfoy family, pure-blood aristocrats serving Voldemort, are sometimes compared to Oswald Mosley, leader of the British Union of Fascists, whose party was notorious for street violence. But honestly, Death Eaters today look even more like a blend of terrorist cell and organized crime. Their ideology is paper thin. If you strip away the slogans about blood purity, what remains is fear, cruelty, and hunger for power. Bureaucracy, media, and the banality of evil. The political system of the wizarding world mirrors modern Britain. Institutions don't really work the way they're supposed to on paper. The Ministry of Magic is a huge organization with countless departments. Formally, it's headed by the minister. In reality, old pureblood families like the Malfoys pull a lot of strings. Even in peaceful times, the ministry is a sluggish, self-protecting bureaucracy full of nepotism. When Voldemort takes over, it turns into the processor of a totalitarian machine. Many officials have to be controlled with the Imperious Curse, which wipes out their will. They go to work, go home, act normal, but sign monstrous orders. Even the minister becomes just a function. The state becomes a service engine for the dictator and his cronies. The perfect embodiment of bureaucratic evil is Dolores Umbridge. Stephen King once said she is the greatest fictional villain since Hannibal Lecter, and he's right. On the surface, she's a pink, kitten-loving administrator. In reality, she's a sadist who delights in other people's helplessness. She arrives at Hogwarts as a senior undersecretary of the ministry, supposedly to restore order. She doesn't even try to become part of the community or win respect. Instead, she rules by decree and punishment. She tortures students for minor infractions, forces Harry to cut words into his own skin, constantly changes the rules. She doesn't care what anyone thinks of her, and that kills her career. Even the ministry, for all its cynicism, understands how toxic she is. Look at how public opinion is handled. The wizarding world has essentially a state monopoly on mass media. The ministry controls the main newspaper, the Daily Prophet. Once Dumbledore and Harry announce Voldemort's return, the Prophet first hedges, then slides into open propaganda. By the end, only one narrative is allowed. The headmaster is insane, and Harry is an attention-seeking liar. But this works less and less on those who actually know what's going on. Harry supporters only grow more united. When official media turn into loudhailers, they start their own pirate radio, literally a podcast, long before the word became trendy. Religion without God. Harry as a secular messiah. Now let's touch the most sensitive topic. Religion. Harry Potter has been repeatedly attacked by religious conservatives. Some see in it propaganda of witchcraft and Satanism. and the dark rituals don't help. The graveyard scene in Goblet of Fire, where Wormtail brews a new body for Voldemort from blood, bone, and flesh, is nightmare fuel. But even if you ignore dark magic, critics claim that any magic is incompatible with proper faith. It's not enough for them that the books clearly condemn evil magic. On the other side of the spectrum, you have modern pagans and Wiccans who worship Rowling. Some literally approach her on the street and try to kiss her hands. She keeps telling them, "Please don't involve me in this." The truth is, magic in Harry Potter is just a narrative tool. It's part of the decor, like the castle and the robes. Magic is powerful, but not omnipotent. It cannot truly resurrect the dead or give eternal life. It cannot cure every illness. Wizards celebrate Christmas, fear, death, and grieve like everyone else. The series is almost completely free of explicit religion, but it's full of Christian imagery and ethics. Dumbledore, in many ways, is a God the Father figure. Even after his death, everything unfolds as if according to his plan. If he is the father, Harry is the son. Rowling very deliberately uses gospel motifs, and the closer we get to the finale, the more direct they become. At the end, Harry has to sacrifice himself so that Voldemort can be defeated. According to Christian theology, Christ's sacrifice atones for the sins of humanity. On the cross, Jesus cries, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" On the way to the forest, Harry has a similar moment. In the portrait of Dumbledore, he can no longer find clear guidance. He feels alone. Both have witnesses to their resurrection. In the Gospels, the first to see the risen Christ is Mary Magdalene. In Deathly Hallows, the first person to realize Harry is alive is Narcissa Malfoy. Out of maternal love, she lies to Voldemort and saves Harry in order to save her own son. Harry is twice saved by the love of mothers. First by Lily's sacrificial protection, then by Narcissa's lie. Like Christ, Harry has no real family, no partner, no private life during his mission. He belongs to the world. He must suffer to save others. But then Rowling breaks the usual pattern. Christ, after his death, becomes fully divine. Heracles joins the gods on Olympus. Harry refuses that path. When the killing curse hits him, he lands in a limbo-like King's Cross. He is given a choice: go on or return. If he goes on, he'll be reunited with his dead loved ones. When he uses the Resurrection Stone, his parents, Sirius, and his fallen friends appear as if waiting for him on the other side. But Harry, almost without hesitation, chooses to go back. He rises again and defeats Voldemort for good. His resurrection is the final piece locking in the Christ parallel, and it was foreshadowed long before by Dumbledore's Phoenix, Fawkes, burning up in front of Harry and then being reborn from ashes, an early Christian symbol of Christ. Rowling gives a secular, non-church generation a familiar story pattern: sacrifice, death, rebirth, but without institutional religion. No sermons, no dogma, only ethics. Two sins are condemned especially clearly: despair and pride. Despair in the books can take the shape of dementors, creatures that suck out all joy and will to live. But it also appears as normal human grief. The Patronus charm is essentially a cognitive behavioral exercise. To cast it, you have to focus on your brightest memory and hold it until the darkness recedes. At the same time, we see characters like Dumbledore and Snape who never fully work through their guilt and grief, and so they remain unhappy for life. Endless self-torment destroys them. Pride goes hand in hand with careerism and hunger for recognition. Percy Weasley breaks with his family for the sake of his status, but later realizes there are values more important than a nice office. For millennials, the most therapized and career-obsessed generation in history, this moral framework hits very close to home. Power, justice, and Azkaban. Let's talk politics. There are entire academic theses on the political world of Harry Potter. Politics here is understood broadly as the way the Wizarding Society is organized, and that society is often more messed up than the Muggle one. Pureblood ideology, the idea that magical race determines your worth, is the central traditional myth. It fuels Grindelwald's crimes in the 40 Seconds. It resurfaces in the Death Eater's propaganda. Hogwarts stands in opposition to this myth. The school takes children regardless of blood status. The Sorting Hat doesn't measure skull sizes. It's a social elevator, a chance for talent to break through. But even inside Hogwarts, there is casual prejudice. Draco Malfoy calling Hermione a mudblood is a learned, internalized racism. Outside school, things are harsher. Whole magical species live under what is essentially a soft apartheid. House elves are enslaved. Goblins are mistrusted bankers. Werewolves are treated like unpersons. By law, only humans are allowed Wands' legal, institutional discrimination. Rowling's attitude to British class traditions is also pretty clear. Old titles, gilded families, hereditary privilege, all of that is mocked or shown as dangerous. Even good characters, like Sirius Black, can be cruel to those they see as beneath them, like Kreacher, the house elf he constantly insults. Kreacher literally has no agency or legal protection, he's property. When we switch from social structure to law enforcement, things get even uglier. Azkaban, the main wizard prison, is guarded by Dementors. Merely being in their presence slowly kills your ability to feel joy. For some criminals, that's supposed to be the whole sentence. A living death. Harry Potter was published when debates about the US prison system and mass incarceration were gaining steam. Azkaban is a magical caricature of any system where punishment is not about justice or reintegration, but about pure annihilation. Dumbledore loathes Dementors and constantly argues they should never have been given so much power. He builds the Order of the Phoenix as almost the opposite structure. No uniforms, no strict hierarchy, no official status. Just trust, personal responsibility, and shared values. But even Dumbledore's model has its limitations. He's so far above everyone else, so secretive, that people follow him more out of personal faith than understanding. His power is almost mystical. Harry's leadership is different. At first it seems he's no leader at all. He doesn't want authority, has no manifesto. The Secret Defense Association is Hermione's idea more than his. But inside Dumbledore's army, Harry becomes a new type of leader, first among equals. He doesn't micromanage. He teaches, shares experience, inspires. He goes into danger first. He doesn't demand blind obedience. He offers a path and says, if you want, come with me. For the millennial generation, this is almost the ideal leadership model. Flat structures, shared responsibility, informal authority. Magic and the future. How Rowling predicted our world. Now the big question, how did Rowling manage to predict the future? The answer starts with a simple observation. Magic in Harry Potter works like technology. Wizards use it to make life more comfortable, to speed up routine work, to communicate. Magic is a service. And many magical gadgets look suspiciously like things we invented later. In Goblet of Fire, Sirius Black is on the run, but wants to warn Harry. One night, his head appears in the Gryffindor fireplace. That's early 2000s video conferencing Skype, years before Skype. The Marauders map is a live, moving map with all the people in the castle marked in real time. That's Google Maps with geolocation, with a dash of Find My Friends. Rita Skeeter's Quick Quotes Quill is basically an early neural network. Harry gives a nuanced answer. The quill instantly rewrites it into snarky tabloid style. That's auto-paraphrasing with a toxic bias. The moving portraits in Hogwarts are animated, talking images with limited memory and personality, a proto-deepfake plus a voice bot. Entering someone else's memory through the pensieve is an early metaphor for VR. You put your face in and find yourself inside a fully immersive scene. Only in the pensieve, you're less likely to smash into a wall. Rowling, of course, didn't invent AI or video calls, but she intuited the direction in which a comfortable, convenience-driven society would evolve and the psychological consequences. She also sketches out new types of communities and organizations long before words like flat structure or teal organization became trendy. Dumbledore's army is almost a textbook teal team. Minimum hierarchy, maximum transparency, shared mission, freedom to act. Why Harry Potter became the Bible of millennials. So what do we get in the end? Rowling didn't just write a fun story about wizards. She wired into Harry Potter the structure of ancient myths and classics, a Christmas story arc of personal transformation, echoes of Greek heroes, Dante and Shakespeare, a secularized Christian narrative of sacrifice and resurrection, a full political model of a society sliding into and out of authoritarianism, a surprisingly accurate sketch of future technologies and flat, value-driven communities, and a set of ethical tools for a generation obsessed with therapy, identity, and anxiety. For millennials, the people who grew up page by page, along with Harry, this worked like a foundational myth. A lot of us, consciously or not, compare reality to Hogwarts, bosses to Umbridge or Voldemort, mentors to Dumbledore, our own burnout to Dementors. In a sense, we really do live in a world Harry Potter helped build, not because magic is real, but because the people who read those books in bed are now the ones making decisions. Thanks for staying with me to the very end. Your attention to big, dense videos like this is the most valuable thing for us. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like. And if this video reaches 1,000 likes, we'll make another deep dive into the hidden meanings and secret messages of movies and books. Most importantly, share this video with your friends and family, both those who love Harry Potter and those who roll their eyes at it. New video coming very soon. Bye.